Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back. It is currently December 8th. It's a Sunday, and it's fucking 40 degrees here in Minnesota. And Shavkat Rachmanov won last night, so I'm pretty fucking hyped. Uh, yeah, in this episode, I will say I think it's gonna end up being a two-parter because I got 7 pages of notes here, and I don't think I can get it done all in one, dude. You guys know I'm like McQueen, dude. I start to fade towards the end. You know what I mean? I'm a first half podcast type of guy. Um, but yeah. So this episode is about Magellan's circumnavigation. And for some reason, I want to say Magellan. I think Magellan is just, it's nicer to say, but so I'll probably say that quite a few times. I'll probably mispronounce a lot of these names because they're Portuguese and Spanish and also from like the 16th century. So there's that too. But yeah, I think this is going to end up being a two-parter, but who cares, dude? No one's listening, and it's nice to get a two-parter under my belt just to like understand how to do that. Um, and so yeah, I think we're just gonna get started, dude. Get started on this road trip. All right, we're gonna get a little background around our driver. You know what I mean? I'm gonna try to like talk about it like it's a road trip. I think that's the goal for this episode. But so we're going to start off with a little background on Magellan himself. So Ferdinand Magellan was born in 1480 in northern Portugal. His father Pedro was a minor member of the Portuguese nobility and mayor of the town Ferdinand was born in. And so, yeah, I think minor member, I don't really know what that means, but like if the president is royalty, then this guy's kind of like a state senator. Like not even like a national senator, you know what I mean? Like how there's people that go to DC. I think this dude is like staying in the state to campaign. You know what I mean? I think it's like that type of thing, which I guess all those senators do, but this guy like I don't know. I don't really know how to describe a state senator to anyone that doesn't know what it is. It's like a senator that doesn't represent the state nationally. He just represents the state in terms of the state. I don't know. But I think that's kind of like what this dude was. Like I said, he was a mayor, so a minor member of the thing. You know what I mean? He was like the third cousin, which I mean, as we'll talk about later, they're not really keeping track of this shit too well, which is probably why everyone was so fucking inbred. Um, but yeah, so this guy was a minor member of the nobility of Portugal. And as a child, Ferdinand was a page, which is basically a servant, to Queen Eleanor of Portugal. And Queen Eleanor, goddamn, dude, this first Zen of the day. I got my first Zen in, and that shit, anyone that doesn't know, it feels like heroin with a capital H, dude. This shit's got me leaning, bending over, you know what I mean? Having a seizure. But yeah, and so she was the wife of the king, who was King John II. And I was like, I was wondering, dude. So I think Ferdinand might have been a little young for this, but you know how people say like the Secret Service like fucks the president's wife or whatever? I wonder if she had something like that. Like that's kind of what Rasputin was. Rasputin was just like a fucking big dick crazy Russian that was fucking, you know, all the members of the nobility. So I think Ferdinand was maybe a little young for this, but I think she also might have had some shit like that. And in 1495, he became servant to Manuel I of Portugal, a king whose reign would be marked by intensive expansion. In 1505, when he was 25, Ferdinand enlisted in the 7th Indian Armada, which was commanded by Francisco de Almeida, the first viceroy of Portuguese India. And I didn't know that Portugal had any control over India at the time, so I kind of looked up where they were, and they're kind of in like that southwest little part of India. Like it's a very small territory, but that's where they were. And during his time, uh, in this armada, in the 7th Indian Armada, goddamn, dude, Magellan fought in several battles, mostly in the Arabian Sea, and he was injured in the Battle of Cananore in 1506. So yeah, he was fighting off fucking pirates, Muslim armies, trying to set up their bases in India. So that's kind of what he was doing for the 7th Indian Armada. So this dude was always at sea. And I think this is one of those dudes that just for some reason loves the sea. I don't look, the sea's sick, but I mean it's also scary as hell. You know what I mean? And he didn't whatever. I was gonna say something. I don't want to spoil, dude. I don't want to spoil the road trip. You know what I mean? I think everyone knows where we're going with this road trip, but I don't want to spoil it. It's a fun adventure. Um, But he remained in Portuguese India for 8 years before leaving to sail under Diego Lopez de Secura. Uh, Alongside Magellan was his friend and maybe cousin Francisco Sado, something like that. So yeah, like I was saying, they don't really know if this dude was his cousin, but throughout like everything I was looking at, they kept referring to him as his cousin. So I think that was confirmed. And this dude is Francisco Cerro. He's kind of a beast, as we'll find out. But during his time, they were sent to Malacca, which is like this part in Asia. And I drew a map that I'll post on the Instagram, but it's basically where modern day Malaysia is. And it's still like a state in Malaysia. It's like, yeah, it's just like what a small part of what modern day Malaysia is. Um, to set up trade and probably also conquer it. Like they say, they were like, oh, we're just going there to set up trade. What that means is they were probably going to try to conquer that area to use it for like spices and tea and all that stuff so they could trade it back to Portugal. I think that's what that means. That could be wrong. But this voyage would end up in retreat with Magellan warning Secura, who was like the uh, captain of this whole thing, like the leader. Everyone was sailing under him. And he also saved Seto's life, his cousin. And in 1511, Magellan and his cousin participated in the conquest of Malacca. So, like I said, I think that first time they were just trying to test the water, see what was up, see if Malacca could defend themselves. Um, but yeah, they came back. They got their shit in blood. Um, Under Alfonso de Albuquerque, which I thought was funny, because Albuquerque, I don't know, it's like a city in New Mexico, and it's like everyone imagines Albuquerque as like this gray, shitty city in New Mexico, and here we have like this royal named after it, or that it was probably named after, or probably some Spanish royal, to be honest. Um, but Magellan was promoted during this time, and he was given riches of plunder as well as a slave named Enrique of Malacca. Enrique, it's kind of funny hearing like these Spanish and like Portuguese names that are like close to what we think of as like Mexican names and shit, and it's just like some dude from Malaysia. But this dude, Enrique, he was also known as Henrique and like Henrique, which I think is like a French translation uh, probably, and he was said to be like half Malaysian and half white. So I don't know. I don't know who was there before. Doesn't really matter too much. We just got to know the name Enrique of Malacca or Henrique. Um, Seto, his cousin, would be sent to expeditions to find the Spice Islands in Moluccas, which is like basically central Indonesia. And I guess this is where all these spices grow. I feel like they could have grown at other places. Like they could have maybe Southwest India doesn't get enough rain, or maybe it gets too much rain. I don't know. It kind of seems, or maybe they didn't understand seeds. Like I said, these dudes weren't keeping track of who their cousins were, so they might have not understood that you can plant things from one region in another region. Yeah, they probably could have planted some of these in Europe, to be honest. Uh, but doesn't matter. So Enceto, he remained in the Spice Islands of Indonesia, I think for the rest of his life, and he would continue to communicate with Magellan and give him valuable information about the Spice Islands. So I think the information he was giving him is like what they were growing, like the local culture, the local government, all that shit. And this is going to be important, a little bit important later on. But Magellan would have a falling out with the King of Portugal, Manuel I, in 1515 and would move to Spain in 1517. So, yeah, and like I'll explain what caused the falling out. The falling out was related to Manuel I's rejection of Magellan's idea to sail westward to find the Spice Islands. So, and this is how Magellan ends up, circumnavigating the globe. So, basically, the world was split in half by the Pope, and half was given to Portugal and half was given to Spain. And Magellan wanted to sa- to sail west to get to the Spice Islands for some reason, even though Portugal already had control over the eastern half trade or the eastern half trade routes. So I don't know. I feel like that's a fair rejection. And he fought the Moors and he was accused of illegally trading with the Moors during his time fighting them, I guess. Which I mean is understandable because if you know history, then like 100 years before that Spain, Iberia, Portugal, like that whole little, you guys know what I mean, like the boot or not the boot. I guess it's like the tip of Europe, was pretty much conquered almost entirely by the Moors. And there was like a 700-year series of wars and battles to reconquer it. So I think that's a fair enough, condemnation of Magellan. He was cleared of this, but he probably did it. You know what I mean? This guy, it's very clear he doesn't really give a shit about like what the kings think. He's just trying to do his own shit. You know what I mean? It's like what he thinks is right, he's doing. Which I mean, look, that either turns out really poor, like you end up drunk in the streets, or you end up circumnavigating the globe. The globe. I think it just depends on what your fucking goals are. You know what I mean? Like if your goal is getting high all the time, you're gonna get high all the time. If you just don't care what anyone else thinks. If you want to circumnavigate the globe, you're doing it. You know what I mean? And he also did have the advantage of being like a minor member of nobility himself, I guess. And that's kind of like what all these dudes were. I think like even Christopher Columbus, who was Italian, I think he was probably like a minor member of nobility over there. And that's just how like you got connections back in the day. That's kind of how you get connections now, to be honest. Like if you're in America and you like know a guy who knows a guy, that's basically what this is. Um, but while in Spain, Magellan married a Portuguese woman and had two children with her, both of whom died very young. So yeah, he had two kids. They both died very young. And like I said, I don't think he really was interested in marriage or kids. I think he was busy, you know what I mean, getting active in the ocean. Um, and his wife would also pass away in 1521 while Magellan was circumnavigating the globe. But during all this, Magellan was studying charts to find a route to the Spice Islands through the Atlantic. And I don't know why he was doing this under Portugal. I think he was just finding any excuse he could to circumnavigate the globe. You know what I mean? It's like when someone's like quietly trying to suggest like what restaurant they want to go to. It's like, dude, I've really been craving fucking orange chicken lately, and it's like, cool, dude. I don't know. None of us are hungry. I think it's like that type of thing. It's like, God damn, can you shut up about this? I don't know. And then I have a map here of the Spice Islands or the Moluccas, and then Malacca, which I mean, I think these are both like Malaysian names for things, which is why they sound so similar. But I'm gonna call the Spice Islands because I don't know. As you can tell, I can barely pronounce Magellan, so I think Moluccas and Malacca could end up getting, a little mixed up. All right, so we're gonna start off with the trip. Let me get a head count. I want to know the plan. We can't just start off out of nowhere. So, Portugal controlled all the eastern routes to the Spice Islands during this time, meaning if the Spanish wanted access to them, they would have to find another way. Magellan, now in Spain, used letters from Cerro to convince Cerro. I think Cerro is just how like white trash pronounces it, so that's how I'm gonna pronounce it. To convince Charles the First, who was the king of Spain at the time, that the Spice Islands were so far east that they fell under Spanish rule. So, like I said, they split the world in half, east and west. No one really knew what the full globe looked like at this time. As we'll find out later, they didn't really know what the Pacific Ocean was. Um, but yeah, he was trying to convince this dude, Charles the First. And if you know anything about the Spanish royal family, Charles the Second was like severely inbred. So this dude was probably like low key inbred. He wasn't quite like, you guys know the Whitakers, like that family in West Virginia that one dude always interviews and they're always going like, they can't talk. I think this dude was like one level above that. You know what I mean? So this guy was basically trying to convince a retarded guy what was going down. And as we'll find out, he used that to his advantage. Uh, yeah, so he was trying to say that in the treaty that split the world in half was called the Treaty of Tordesillas. So, yeah. He also claimed that Enrique, his slave, was a native of the islands. Yeah, these dudes were inbred as hell. He was just like, trust me, and also, fucking, they didn't know. You know what I mean? I'm sure Charles the First of Spain never visited Malacca or the Spice Islands. You know what I mean? And Charles the Spain would also go on to be the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which I guess was an elected position, and he just like paid off everyone to get there. So Spain was balling out at this time, and also Spain, they were the ones that sent Christopher Columbus over, even though he was Italian. So I think Spain was just like, fuck it, dude. It worked out pretty well the first time. Let's see what happens. And I think that's how they were rocking with this. This might be a one-parter. I don't know, dude. Now that I'm looking at these walls of text here, I think it's going to be a two-parter. I'll slow down and try to like explain things more. But eventually, Charles the First agreed to fund the voyage, much to the chagrin of Manuel the First. who saw this as an insult and tried to stop it, eventually sending a fleet after Magellan. What's the Magellan? I said it, dude, and I'm gonna continue to say it. I'm coming. I'm gonna continue to come. But he eventually sent a fleet after Magellan once the voyage began, but this failed. Yeah, dude, Magellan was just like an autistic buzzsaw. He was just like, I'm sailing around the world. I don't care what anyone thinks. Fucking come and get me. I think that's how he was moving with this shit. And also I think Manuel the First of Portugal, the King of Portugal, he was like vandalizing like the ships and stuff. I think he tried to send an assassin after Magellan's dad at one point. He was so pissed about this for no reason. As we'll find out, it didn't really work out in Magellan's favor. You know what I mean? But Magellan was granted five shits. Goddamn. The Trinidad, which was the head ship, and this was captained by Magellan. The San Antonio, captained by Juan de Carta Cartagena, the Concepcion, captained by Gaspar de Quesada, something like that. The Santiago, captained by uh, João Sato, which is the same last name as his cousin, so they might have been related. I don't know. And then the Victoria, which was captained by Luis Mendoza. Magellan's voyage was given 2 years of rations, which was mostly wine and hardtack, as well as 270 men, mostly of Spanish and Portuguese origin, as well as some French and Italians. So the bulk of this was Spanish and Portuguese, a little bit less of French and Italians, and then like we're talking like 5 to 10 of Flemish, which is like a Dutch-speaking region of Belgium, I guess, German, Greek, Irish, English, Asian, and black sailors. All right. So that's kind of the setup for this. Yeah, basically all the rations they had were hardtack and wine. They had some livestock, but I think they just assumed that they were gonna find a bunch of crazy animals along the way, which they did, dude. They found all kind of shit. Um, sorry, but yeah, and they also had a small ration of this stuff called kise, which is it's basically like a jelly made from a plant that's rich in vitamin C. But they didn't tell the main crew about this obviously, because they didn't want a mutiny. As and as we'll find out, they got a couple. Um, but yeah, and this is probably the reason why Magellan and so many of the other commanders survived so long on this voyage is because they had access to this thing that had vitamin C in it. But they didn't know. They just thought it was like some shit that tasted good. You know what I mean? So they weren't like intentionally hurting their crew. They were just kind of like, fucking, don't let these guys know about the jelly. All right, the jelly's just for us. Um, and it was probably sour as shit, to be honest. This is like candy from like the 1500s, you know what I mean? They didn't have the sugar plantations and stuff they have now. But let's get this show on the road, dude. We got the setup. We know what's going down. They got five ships. Uh, I think the main ship was different from the rest somehow. But yeah, I think the other four were called carracks, which is just like a long voyage ship. You know what I mean? It's like a ship set up for that type of thing. It's not for war or for like short trips. It's for long trips. Um, but the voyage set sail September 20th, 1519 from Sanlúcar, Barmada. And this is like the mouth of a river. So they sailed upriver to this place where they left. Um, the voyage stopped almost immediately in the Canary Islands to buy provisions. And this is like the gas station stop, you know what I mean? It's like you're like not even 10 minutes into the drive and you're like, all right, pull over to this gas station, let's fuel up, let's get some fucking beef jerky, and let's get this show on the road. And they bought mostly vegetables and stuff here because it was so much cheaper to buy them in the Canary Islands for some reason. Maybe taxes? I don't know. People always care about taxes. I don't know. It's like when you go to another state to buy gas. Like I'm from Kansas, like right along the Kansas-Missouri line, and some people, especially people that work in Missouri, go over to Missouri to buy gas because it's cheaper there. I think that's what they were doing, you know what I mean? Um, but on this stop, what happened? Magellan was informed of the Portuguese fleet chasing him, and he received a secret message that the captain of the San Antonio was planning a mutiny. You know what I mean? Shit's getting active almost immediately. There's drama on the road trip. This was like a reality show. This was the Jersey Shore of the time. You know what I mean? They weren't Italians, they were Portuguese, which I don't know. That's like a step and a half away from Italian. It's like Portuguese are basically Spanish. Spanish are pretty close to Italian. Even though they're separated by France, they're more similar to each other than they are to France. So this was basically the Jersey Shore at the time, just a bunch of dudes on a boat fighting about nothing. And as we'll find out, they really did fight about nothing. But so Magellan sailed south along the African coast to avoid capture by the Portuguese. As the voyage neared the equator, uh, wait, so they got near the equator, and as they did, they experienced a bunch of intense storms for about 2 weeks. And during this time, there was like dudes whose job it was to keep notes. They were talking about how like they were seeing saints in the sky and shit. They saw like what's called Saint Elmo's fire, which is basically like a huge ball of lightning. These dudes had no fucking idea what was going on, dude, and they had no idea what was ahead of them. But from what I understand, this is the most intense period of storms that they faced on their adventure around the world. Adventure. Uh, all right. But after this, once they got to the equator, I guess the equator is like pretty calm waters, you know what I mean? Which I guess makes sense because if you look at one of like those maps of storms, like none of them get close to or cross the equator. I guess because of magnets or gravity or something, dude. I don't know, dude. I'm basically one of these dudes in the 1500s. When they saw saints in the sky, or when they said they saw saints in the sky, I was like, fuck it, dude. All right, I believe you. I have no idea either. It's like if you told these fuckers that magnets is the reason storms never cross the fucking equator, they would have executed you. You know what I mean? Head chopped off, rolling immediately. That's just the type of dudes these were, as we'll find out. But after this, they started westwards towards Brazil. During this time, a sodomy trial was held, and one man was sentenced to death. And they killed this dude. They like tied him to a chair. This is how they said they did it. And they killed him like mafia style. You know what I mean? They strangled him to death at a chair. And apparently they were saying like on these long naval voyages, it was like normal for dudes to get active. But I think sodomy is like when you fuck in the butt. So I think that's the thing. I think if you're sucking or giving hand jobs or whatever, no one really cares. But once you get in the butt, it's like that's a step too far, dude. Like that's actually gay. It's like in prison how they say like if you have sex with a man during a certain time when you're in prison, it's like not gay. I think these dudes, and this was pretty soon into the voyage, so that might have also been uh, a part of why they killed one of them. And then they ended up killing another one. They just threw him off the side of a ship. But yeah, and this is, dude, we're fucking barely into the voyage. We're like crossing over to South America. We're not even halfway there, and dudes are getting thrown off boats, killed mafia styles. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was just reading my notes. And then after the trial, Cartagena, who was the captain of the San Antonio, so this fucking information Magellan got was valid, attempted I wrote attempted twice. He attempted a mutiny, which was quickly quashed. He was eventually let free, but replaced as captain. So I think he ended up going on the Victoria. It might have been the Trinidad. I think he might have been on Magellan's boat, just kind of chilling. Um, but on November 29th, 1519, the voyage made landfall in northern Brazil. You know what I mean? April 1519, we're getting going, you know what I mean? We're in Brazil by now. Fucking we might beat the time we're thinking. We said 2 years, we might beat 2 years. Who knows? Um, and the voyage made landfall in northern Brazil. Okay, before going south along the coast of Rio de Janeiro, uh, where they spent 13 days. So they landed in northern Brazil. They probably got some shit, and then they went south to Rio de Janeiro, and they spent 13 days in Rio. And these 13 days involved trade with the locals who were familiar with Europeans due to logging exhibitions. I wrote logging exhibitions for logging, dude. As you can tell, we're already 3.5 pages in, and I was tired as hell writing this. But there was also a lot of sucking and fucking, dude. They quickly, almost immediately, I think, found out that they could pay the local women for sex, and they were like, dude, I'm not getting a rough hand job from some dude on a boat. I'm fucking this hot ass Brazilian chick, which I can't blame them. As anyone knows, I think if you're gonna pay, it's gonna be the Brazilians. Um, So yeah, they were sucking and fucking and trading for 13 days. The fleet continued to go south until on January 11th, 1520, Magellan discovered what he believed to be the passage between the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Uh, yeah, he sent one ship to probe the strait while he looked for the fabled Terras Australis, which is, they always said there was a continent like in Terras Australis means the southern land, and that's also where Australia gets his name. And Terras Australis was basically Antarctica. They knew something like Antarctica had to exist. I don't know how they knew it. They I think it's one of those things where they thought the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. Because they were like, it has to balance out the globe. I think that's what they were thinking when they were talking about Terrace Australis, which might be valid. I don't know anything about globe balance or whatever. Um, but he found nothing when he went south because it's way too far south. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Especially for like those boats of the time. And the strait that they're gonna have to cross is also really not meant for boats of the time. But he found nothing, and the strait that they thought they found was the mouth of a river. I guess it was just a huge river. I meant to look it up, but I didn't. It's probably not that wide. Magellan was just probably kind of retarded. But this is also kind of near the tip of like Argentina and Chile. You know what I mean? So it might have been open enough at one point for him to think it was the strait, but it wasn't. And they also like probed the river, and they were like, "This is way too shallow. Even if it was the strait, we can't get through it." Um, but in late March, Magellan was forced to stop the voyage due to rough seas, and the group decided to winter in the port of St. Julian, where they remained for 5 months. Okay, so they're looking for this strait. They're kind of at the southern tip of South America, and it's just too rough. You know what I mean? And it's like March is like prime winter in the southern hemisphere, especially at this point. You know what I mean? They're kind of near Antarctica. And so they stayed there for 5 months. And on the first day after making landfall, another more successful mutiny was attempted. The mutineers captured three ships, but Magellan sank one and killed the other mutiny with an assassin. So, yeah, they started the mutiny, got three ships. Magellan and his two ships sank one of their ships, and then they sent over like this dude to pretend like he wasn't surrendering, but that he was joining the mutiny, and he like just stabbed this dude in the neck, killed him instantly, and the mutiny was over. Um, And really, I don't think anyone got, I think like a couple people got killed. Yeah, several of the mutineers were executed or left marooned. But I don't think it was three full ships. I don't think Magellan like logistically could have punished all the people from this mutiny. And like I said, Magellan didn't get fucked up. This dude's an autistic buzzsaw. So he just fucking, he was like, all right, I'll sink one of my own ships. I don't care. Which honestly kind of was the right move. All right, so we're down one ship at the southern tip of South America. We're down to four ships. I don't remember which one he sunk, but it honestly doesn't really matter. In late Magellan, or in late April, Magellan sent the Santiago to scout ahead for the strait, but the ship capsized despite this, all the men survived and were rescued. So yeah, he sent this one ship south to kind of like see what was going on around the southern tip of South America. It ended up like running into land and then capsizing, which is probably why they all survived. And then he sent like a land rescue team to go and find them, and they were living in huts, eating penguins and shit, having a grand old time. I don't think anyone lived this far south yet. Uh, so there were no women to pay for sex, dude, they were like, all right, look, the boat capsized, at least we can pay women for sex. And it's like, no, dude, there's no women down here. There's nothing to eat. You're just munching on penguins, which I mean, as long as they're not near the water, I think you can get one of those boys pretty easily, so they probably weren't too upset. But the voyage set sail again on October 18th and discovered the Strait of Magellan. They it said they rounded the tip on October 21st and discovered the Strait of Magellan in about like mid-November. So, I mean, the voyage is going pretty slow at this point, but they are in very rough seas. Like the Strait of Magellan now is like, it's still hard for boats to get through it now. I'm sure it's much easier because the boats are made out of metal and like powered. They don't rely on the wind, but it's still very, very rough seas. Not as rough as in winter, which is probably why they had to hunker down. But the voyage continued up the western coast of South America. During this time, the San Antonio became separated and returned to Spain. So Magellan at one point, so they have four boats. He split up. I guess they rescued one of the capsized boat. I don't know. They probably just pulled it really fucking hard, which is like, as we'll find out later, they were doing that a lot with these boats. But he split it up once they reached like this island chain, I think off the coast of Peru, to kind of go see what was east and what was west. And one of the boats got lost, which was the San Antonio. In November 1520, the voyage changed direction, sailing west, leaving the coast of South America behind them, and the crew was not prepared for this journey. They had no idea how big the Pacific Ocean was, which is like how I think that they don't know. or that they came to the wrong or the right answer from like the wrong work about Terrace Australis or Antarctica existing. Um, but yeah, they start going west across the Pacific Ocean. They thought it was going to take like as little as 3 or 4 days, no more than a month. And it took 3 months of sailing with barely a speck of land in sight for the voyage to finally arrive in Guam, where a skirmish broke out with the natives. Magellan quickly left the island, landing in the Philippines on March 16th, 1521. And Guam would remain under Spanish control for a while before it like changed hands between the Japanese and finally now America has control of it. But basically what happened in Guam is these dudes came on board and like took some shit and then they took a boat, like one of not one of the main like sailing ships, but like a rowboat to get to shore. They took one of those and yeah, Magellan fucking apparently they burned 40 to 50 huts in Guam. Uh for not a lot of shit stolen to be honest, but I guess get back Magellan. And Magellan just doesn't seem like the type of guy to do this. You're not that type of guy, Magellan. Please don't hurt them. I feel like a chick with a boyfriend that can't stop raging, you know what I mean? This isn't you. Like or like those memes where someone like tries to stop a school shooter by being like, "This isn't you," and he just shoots him in the head. Magellan's like, "Fuck that, dude. They took our little boat. Kill them all." Um, but they left for the Philippines where they arrived on March 16th, 1521, and they arrived in Guam on March 3rd, 1521. And fuck, dude, let's talk about the Philippines. Magellan was killed in the Philippines after trying to convert natives to Christianity. So he arrived in the Philippines and he was trying to convert some group to Christianity, and the guy was like, "No, get the fuck out of here." He might have like killed a couple people, I think. And then Magellan returned with some like local allies, and they fought a battle. And during this battle, Magellan did die. You know what I mean? Fuck it. After how many like what are we at right now? They left in 1519. We're at like almost 2 years out on sea. I'm sure Magellan had hard cabin fever, you know what I mean? All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. He was like, "Oh, you're not going to become Catholic? I bet you are." And he turned out to be right because if you know the Philippines, those boys are Catholic with a capital C. Those guys are, they love the Virgin Mary over there, you know what I mean? So I guess Magellan did ultimately win. And then after this, they had a feast with some of their allies, like the remaining people that were alive, and their allies killed 27 of the men um, who they previously fought with, who were part of Magellan's crew. So yeah, they invited him, and only like 3 people survived. It was like 2 of like the higher ups, and then Enrique, who was Magellan's slave. And the crew was forced to abandon one of the ships at this point due to a lack of men, only having 155 of the original 277. And there were dudes like also along the way dying of like scurvy, malnutrition, starvation, all that type of stuff. And I'm sure like even if you did survive the battle, if your wounds got infected, it was like over for you. At this point, they probably didn't even have like hard spirits, you know what I mean? Like high alcohol content spirits to like treat the wounds. God damn, this is gonna end up being a one-parter. Who would have thunk? God damn, that was a lot of notes for a one-parter, but hey, who cares, man? Um, yeah, so they were forced to abandon one of the ships, and after leaving the Philippines, it took the crew 6 months to find the Spice Islands, uh, where the crew traded Western goods such as cloth, knives, and glass for spices, specifically cloves and cinnamon. That's what they were there for. And during their 6 month trip of looking for the Spice Islands, the 2 remaining ships, the Trinidad and the Victoria, engaged in piracy and battled the Prince of Brunei, who they eventually captured and ransomed. And this dude was a good sport about it. He was like, "Fuck it, you got me." He like ended up leaving like a couple of Spanish-speaking Moors who were these dudes from like Northern Africa who got pushed out to they had to go all the way east because they got pushed out by Spain, and he left a couple of those guys with the crew who and these dudes were slaves. So after trying to leave the Spice Islands, one of the boats, the Trinidad, was found to be taking on water. Because of this, the 2 ships returned to the Spice Islands, and there, aided by the locals, tried to fix the ship. But the damage on the Trinidad was too much, and the expedition broke up, with the Victoria heading westward back to Spain, and the Trinidad would be repaired and go eastward, would be where it would be carried over the Isthmus of Panama. Panama, which is like the thinnest point of Panama that connects or that's between the Pacific and the Atlantic. So they were going to carry the ship over that. And like I said, dude, these dudes were just using brute strength to get shit done. Um, but during their trip back, the Trinidad was captured by the Portuguese and sunk in a storm while at anchor under Portuguese control. So, and the reason that they captured the ship is because it was in Portuguese territory, and also probably, it doesn't say this, but this is my guess, as we'll find out later, the Portuguese really didn't want the Spanish having control over these spices, or like even having access to them. They wanted them to exclusively have to get them through Portugal. Um, but the Victoria set sail westward on December 21st, 1521, and reached the Cape of Good Hope in southern Africa. Um, doesn't say when it did that, but that's like the southern tip of Africa you have to sail around to get up north. And I think those are far calmer waters than the Strait of Magellan. Um, and after rounding the Cape, 20 crewmen died of starvation before the Victoria pulled into Portuguese-controlled Cape Verde for provisions on July 9th, 1522. Um, at first, the crew had no trouble, but once the Portuguese found out that the Victoria was carrying spices from the East Indies, they detained 13 of the crew. Upon hearing this, the rest of the crew boarded the Victoria, which with 15 or goddamn, with 26 tons of spices, and headed for San Clair de Barmada in Spain. The ship arrived in Sanlúcar on September 6th, almost exactly 3 years after leaving from that same city. The ship sailed inland to Seville, which was, I guess, at that time the capital of Spain, and then they carried the boat overland to Valladolid, Valladolid, where they appeared before now Emperor Charles V or Charles I. So I guess he had to change his name when he became emperor, dude. He basically tranced. So next time someone talks about the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, talk about how sus that dude is. God damn, we're gonna get this done in 45 minutes. I don't know. My brain is kind of dead right now. I stayed up pretty late last night, which I don't normally do, which is probably why I'm getting this done so quick. But now back in Spain, 18 men had survived. Only 18 of the original 270 men had survived, along with one of their ships, the Victoria. 12 of the men captured. Goddamn, dude, you can tell I was tired writing this. I wrote 12 of the men captured in Victoria. 12 of the men who were captured by the Portuguese in Cape Verde, where they stopped for supplies, which is kind of off the coast of Africa, were eventually released that same year. And so those dudes also completed the circumnavigation of the world. Um, and 5 of the men from the Trinidad, which was the ship that they couldn't sail westward, so they went eastward. Those guys were also released by the Portuguese, but only 5 of them, in like from 1525 to 1526. Um, the Victoria was sold to a merchant and sailed for another 50 years before mysteriously sinking. She brought all the crew with her when she did. So yeah, this lady was kind of done with the bullshit. She was like, dude, I already sailed around the fucking world. Why do we have to keep doing this? She was like, I'm killing everybody. I don't care. I'm going out. You guys aren't going to be able to salvage me. And there's been a couple replicas made since then. I don't know if it's cursed or haunted or anything. I think it's just they were kind of retarded and they ended up sinking their ship. But fucking dude, what happened to Enrique? Magellan died. Enrique should be free. What's going on with him? And this is interesting. So Enrique of Malacca worked as an interpreter for the expedition in the East Indies and was originally stated to be dead alongside Magellan in the Battle of Mactan in 1521. In reality, Enrique was alive and began and was held on and was held as a slave despite being freed in Magellan's will. God damn, dude. You can tell my brain was dead when writing this. God, if this is how bad it is this week, next week I have finals. So the mini-sode's probably about to be dog shit. I'm probably about to talk about calculus for 20 minutes. In the full episode, it's gonna be far worse than this, but fuck it, we ball, man. Uh, this is just practice. The first 20 episodes of this, I'm realizing 20 is too few. I think the first like 30 episodes are gonna have to be all practice episodes. But look, what are you gonna do? You can't be perfect at everything all the time. But Enrique was being held as a slave despite being freed in Magellan's will. Enrique was freed at a feast. We talked about the feast earlier. This is where he was freed, uh, where he betrayed the Spaniards, causing the massacre of 27 men. This massacre was carried out by the voyage's former allies at the Battle of Mactan, where Magellan perished. So Magellan died in this battle, and Enrique wasn't freed despite should being free. Goddamn, should have being freed. Uh, and he should have been free the whole time because slavery's bad. All right. Um, and so he was like, "Fuck it." He was like, "Dude, I'm not free. Oh, you're not gonna free me? I bet you are. I bet you I'm gonna end up free." So he basically told the former allies of the um of Magellan's voyage that Magellan's people were gonna betray these local allies, and so they killed 27 of the men and they spared Enrique. It is believed that after being freed, Enrique returned to his home in Malacca, making him the first person to ever circumnavigate the Earth. Because remember, he started in Malacca, he went to Spain, then he went all the way around to the Philippines, Guam, all that, and then he returned to Malacca. So he was the first person, it is believed at least, to circumnavigate the Earth. Even though he did it, he ended up having to kill a lot of dudes along the way. But look, this is colonial times. People are getting killed. You know what I mean? Enrique honestly was like the least of the concerns on this shit. But goddamn, dude, my brain is dead. That's all I've got. I've got finals to study for. I've got papers to write. Let's see if I have any notes, any digital notes. And I haven't also recorded a full episode in like a week and a half, so there's that as well. Um, yeah, that's all I have, guys. Sorry, this episode ended up being pretty short. Uh, but it's jam-packed with information. All right, road trip was exciting. A lot of people died along the way. But that's all I've got, guys. I'm sorry. My brain is absolutely dead, and I don't know why. Lack of sleep and studying all the time. I don't know, dude. Maybe that might be it. Who knows? But yeah, that's all I've got. Everyone that's having finals this week, good luck. Good luck with the rest of your life. Good luck with everything. Hopefully I'll see you guys on Wednesday. God damn, dude. I'm so dead right now. And hopefully I'll see you guys on Sunday as well. All right. Peace.